I'll just be navigating the screen.
This is gonna be.
Hands free. Ready for that?
Well, I'll have this, a laser point.
So you gotta. You can.
This is good, it just, you need to hit record.
Okay.
Should be in the, I'll check on my phone too.
Test.
Going to call to order the May 20th meeting, 2024 of the New Garden Township Board of Supervisors. If you would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Did we hold any executive session since the April meeting? I don't think so. No. Okay. So anyone have any public comment? I didn't get any cards, but if anyone has. Okay. And then we had the conditional use hearing that took place at 5 o'clock. So that already passed. We have any recognitions? No. Okay. Then we have a presentation by John Martin about the air show.
Good evening, everyone. Hey, John, if you want to just, you don't have to present up there.
This year is an air show here, of course, out at the airport. As you may know or may not know, we've been running the air show every other year. Due to the TFR impact, the last show that we ran was
For the recording, for the people.
the last air show we ran was in 22. So the air show's back June 25th with a rain date on the 26th. It's a Tuesday from 2 until 10. Just a little information on what goes into planning an air show, what's involved. This is our air show to-do list. Everything starts about a year in advance as far as planning an air show. And one reason why we're running the air show on a Tuesday, again, with the TFRs primarily on the weekend. Getting a clear TFR weekend is next to impossible as far as a commitment from the Secret Service. So 2 years ago, we elected to host the event on a Tuesday afternoon evening, which worked out well. And we're going to do the same again this year. But everything from air show BOS agreement, the FAA, the waiver that needs to go into the administrative office with the FAA to allow for that. Sponsorships, sponsorship certainly helps with funding the bill for the air show. And this year we have had a very successful sponsorship campaign season. We did pick up a title sponsor this year, which is very exciting. Merrill, a Bank of America company, Merrill Lynch. They are our title sponsor. And we have a lot of other local businesses and corporations in our sponsorship lineup as well. This year, this is just a list of some of the performers that will be in attendance at the air show. Paul Doherty air shows. He flies a Christian Eagle biplane. Cross Keys skydiving team will be jumping the flag in to start the event. We had additions on Sunday to announce see if we could get a local contestant for singing the national anthem. We actually had a fairly good turnout. And they don't know yet, but they'll know tomorrow. They're two young ladies, 13 years old, from Avon Grove Middle School that will be singing the national anthem. They very talented young ladies. Kevin Russo air shows will be performing in a T6 Texan. The Jersey Jerks, they will be a formation team that will be there again in Texans. Eric Edgren is one of our evening night show performers. And Nathan Hammond flies a de Havilland Chipmunk who's got pyro attached to the aircraft, and he'll be flying as well. Sky Elements drone. This is a new addition to the air show this year. We have 150 drones that are going to perform a show for everybody. Sky Elements is the company. It's a national company that will be on site, and pretty excited to see them. We will have a DC-3 in attendance this year, the Yukon Sourdough coming out of Hagerstown. Other planned attractions, again, this is a big family event. So besides the airplanes, we do have other things planned. The car show is always a big attraction for our event. We also have monster truck rides planned, face painting, mechanical bull, moon bounces. Bill Kerwood will be in attendance performing magic, and he has a couple performances as well. A few craft vendors, a good 2 handfuls of food trucks of different menus. Beer and wine. Beer will be handled by a local brewery, Beer Here Brewery, and then the wine would be Harvest Ridge. The Holy Smokers will be performing, again, the drone show, and then we end the evening with fireworks. Okay, looking at the schedule, again, the air show itself will kick off at 2 o'clock. The gates will open to the public on Tuesday, the 25th. The rain date is on the 26th. We will be running a special evening with Garmin, which is a way for us to kick off the air show. And what that is a opportunity for us to thank our customers. We've been a Garmin dealer now at the airport for almost a year. Actually, we started last July. It's been a very successful year with our Garmin sales. So this is an opportunity to get back and say thank you to the customers, and also have an opportunity for some of our new potential customers to come in and take a look at our current installs, and also to look at the Garmin kiosk, which they're going to be providing, which is all new, latest and greatest Garmin equipment in the aviation center. So that's going to be on the 24th from 4:30 to 7:30. And then the air show will start that next day. This is just an overall look at our parking lot layout for the event. Parking lot A, B, and C. Primary lot's going to be on the left in the field when you drive in. The overflow parking lot will be B, and then C is across Newark Road. This is a overhead looking at the layout of the main event. MG stands for the main gate, and that's down on our east ramp. The blue line is the crowd line, and you can see most of the static aircraft will be on our west apron. We got word today that a UH-60 will be in attendance. If you're not familiar with that, that's a Black Hawk helicopter. It's coming out of Fort Indian Town Gap. It's a medical unit, so there'll be some recruiters there as well. We have a bunch of antique and classic aircraft that are going to be on display as well. In the back, we have our Future Aviators Kid Zone. That's where you'll find all the face painting, the moon bounces, all the family kid activity. And then the car and tractor show will be down on the east side as well, and our food row by the hangars. We do have ample parking for handicap. We use our main parking lot for initial handicap lot. Once that fills up, we move over to the west side of the airport. Another overhead looking down. The large aircraft for the event typically are on the east ramp area, right down by the main gate, alongside of the antique cars. The red line here designates the hot ramp to our crowd line. Monster truck rides are going to be in this area over here. They'll stage right up on the tarmac by our middle apron, we call it. This is a layout looking at the main aviation center, which turns into a VIP hangar for the event for certain VIPs and the performers and the volunteers. Our west ramp is really our static ramp, and that's where most of the aircraft will be centered. And the Black Hawk's probably going to be in this area somewhere. We staged the performers out on our in between the taxiway and the runway for the event. A couple EMS locations planned, of course, for crash fire, and also public safety will be in their prescribed areas. Nice unique thing about Newgarden, if you have ever been to an air show anywhere else, the airplanes typically fly the runway heading. And the difference about our air show is our aerobatic box is perpendicular to the runway. It's actually a 500-foot line, which means that the center of the box is 500 feet from the crowd line. That's a requirement that we have to maintain. And the aircraft that fly in the box, when they're actually doing their maneuvers, need to stay within this red rectangle. This area has been approved by the FAA. They've already been out and have done a site inspection. And it's approved for this year. The drones also have their box. They have a restricted area during flight, which is the red rectangle, and then the show performance will all be in this blue area here. And believe it or not, their launching area is down on the west ramp within a 25 by 20 foot space for 150 drones. So very excited to see that. It's a new addition to the event, and it should be a lot of fun. Fireworks are going to finish the event. We will have two performers that will perform aerobatics at night. Their aircraft are lit up with LED lights and smoke, and again, some of them have pyro on board their aircraft. But after they get down, we will send up the fireworks, and this just shows the location of the setup for the fireworks. Again, everything's planned as far as spacing between, designated fallout areas of the fireworks and the crowd line. If we're doing an air show at night, we need to have a way for the pilots to see where they are at night. When they go up, the area is dark. Even the runway lights are off. So we will have a couple areas that are designated with strobe lights out to the south of the runway and to the north all the way to Church Road. And those lights designate the center line of the aerobatic box. In the daytime, the pilots will use our west hangar here as a center line marker, but obviously at night they won't be able to see that. And then during the night show, the paramedic sign just shows the location of crash fire during the event. Need to think of a better term. That's a bad term for that, but that's what they call it. This just shows our layout for the light towers. Again, going into the evening, concluding at 10, it's going to be dark, so we have to have light towers in place so the spectators will be able to get back to their cars safely. And this is just a poster that we put together. We will be printing shirts with the actual poster on the back for this year. Hopefully to have those available in a couple weeks. Questions?
No, this sounds fascinating. I had the pleasure to cover so many of the air shows in previous years, but there seems to be something bigger and broader with this upcoming air show. Seems like they're pulling out all the stops here. How you want to talk a little bit about?
So in 22, again, with there were TFR restrictions that we have on the weekdays. Historically, the air shows, well, I mean, it started out as a Sunday show. That it had evolved to a Saturday, Sunday show with performers showing up on Friday, having a practice day on Friday, which turned into a private air show for all the volunteers and the people in the township, which was fabulous. But not being able to get a good weekend, we decided in 22 to let's try a afternoon evening show. Was totally, we weren't really sure how it was going to pan out being during the week with work schedules. But we brought in our first afternoon, evening, and night show. So we had one, Matt Youngkin performed in a Beach 18. It's fabulous. Actually, the first photo, if we can go to that, just the slide opening. That was Matt Youngkin's Beach 18 with the fireworks behind it. It was such a unique thing just to see an airplane up in the air, you know, with smoke and lights. He didn't even have any pyro on his aircraft. That we, you know, the goal this year was, okay, how do we build upon last year 22's success? And we're bringing in two sort of world-renowned performers. Nathan Hammond flies all over the U.S. He performs out at Oshkosh every year, which is arguably the United States' largest air show with, you know, 500,000 spectators and 20,000 airplanes throughout the week. And every night, or not every night, on Wednesday and Saturday night, he performs his night show with the fireworks, and it's pretty fabulous. So we're pretty excited and lucky to have him.
The last question I've got is talk a little bit more about the Sky Elements drone show. You've got 150 drones in that. How will the public be able to enjoy what the drones do? Are there images that we see?
If you could go to the next site or next page, that one there. So where it says sponsored performer, it says sponsored performers. The drone show is very expensive, but we were able to secure 100% sponsorship for just the drones as well. And you know, bringing in 150 drones, again, this is totally new to us. I've never run an event that had drones in it, but drones are getting more and more prevalent in different types of events. Out at Oshkosh, they have a drone show, and what it is, it's a light show. So each drone has a light or multiple lights on it, and they're able to change the images that we on the ground see up in the sky. So working with Sky Elements over the last several months, we've designed a storyboard, and I don't want to give it away yet, of different images that we're going to be presenting that night at the air show. This picture here is a slide of a bunch of drones. I mean, that's the type of thing that you will see in the sky. So all those lights up there are actually drones. And it's all computer programmed, all computer choreographed. It's choreographed to music, and it should be a pretty entertaining sight for everybody to see. Mm-hmm.
Out of curiosity, is this like a financially break-even event, or are you expecting?
We hope to, so the air show is a great public relations tool for the airport. It's really a regional event. It gives us an opportunity to show the benefit of airports, not just in the township, but within the region, and what we do from the history of aviation to modern military. You'll be able to see a little bit of taste of aviation out there. As far as the financial side, sponsorship is key to having, you know, a break-even event, if you will. So, I mean, that's our goal, is to break even, or that's my goal, to break even. Obviously, if the air show brings in revenue, that's great. But we look at it more as a community tool. For instance, face painting. I mean, there's going to be activities on the ground, like food. Obviously, you're going to have to pay. There is a price to enter the grounds. But I really would love to manage expectations of the spectators that come out. When they show up, they're going to see stuff that they've never seen before. They're going to have a great time with their family, and they're going to leave and say, hey, that was wonderful. Last thing that I want to happen is have somebody show up, be underwhelmed, and feel like they got ripped off. I mean, that's not what our goal is. So that's why sponsorship, bringing Merrill Lynch on as a title sponsor is certainly going to help us reach our goal of being self-sustaining for the air show. Now, the weather gods, they play a huge role in this. And over the years, and Steve, you can attest to this, we've tried out rain insurance. Rain insurance gets very expensive, and we were able to collect on it just once, but we paid out of pocket many, many years. In going and talking with other air show organizers, rain insurance has kind of gone by the wayside. It's just too costly for really, it not only has to rain, it has to rain a certain amount between a certain window. It's a roll of the dice. There will be.
And just to clarify, this is the township's portion is 100% funded from completely within the airport enterprise fund. So that's only funded with airport set aside revenues to fund this event.
No local taxpayer dollars. Yeah. Good question. Anybody else?
Any board members? Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Tickets are online, newgardenflyingfield.com. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. And next we have the new website brief from Itsiri. What?
Yeah, I'll use Lisa. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
All right, and then we have the website update from Itsiri, so thank you.
Atsuri Romo, I'm the receptionist here. I also push out most of the communications coming from the township. So for those of you that don't know, we have a completely new website look. And I am here tonight to show you some of the main features. So this is the homepage, which you can find mostly everything. It's the same URL, newgarden.org. And then up here, we have the mega menu. I'm not sure if you can just hover over them. Yeah. Hopefully everything is organized and structured a lot better than the old site. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with the old site, but it was very difficult to maneuver and find stuff through that. But we have a lot of stuff that is split up: board of supervisors, the township manager's office, boards and committees, as well as some other communication stuff, departments and community. And then how do I, if you can go back to government, this is also where you can find the staff directory. If you go to contact us, it is by departments. So each one has whoever is under each department. So you can find Joanne, Chris, and I under Township Manager's office, and then the Public Works Department, the Community Development Department, and Parks and Open Space as well. And the airport, of course. We have the handy dandy search tool here, and if you guys can see that video is all thanks to John Martin, who took that on his drone, so thank you for that. Yeah. And then underneath the search bar, we have the quick links right here. So these are the most popular visited pages that that people search for under our website. So we have agendas and minutes. And then you can click on each single one and it takes you to that certain page. So this agenda center, you can see, is all the agendas and minutes for every single commission, board, committee that we have. And the minutes you can find right here next to the agendas, which is a little bit different than our previous website. We have codes and ordinances. This takes you to E-code, where you can find all of our resolutions, ordinances, all of our legislation passed through supervisors meetings. Forms, permits, and fees. This takes you to all the permits that, if you want to click through that, it has all the permits, and then also you can find some other forms such as pavilion rentals under here, and then right to know request forms. And you can also find the interactive zoning map here. If you click on that, it takes you to the New Garden Township zoning map, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if you guys have messed with that, but it is very cool. It breaks it up by the zoning district, and you can get details on each district and what the zoning entails and all that. Next to forms, permits, and fees, we have parks and open space. On the left-hand side here, you can find most of the parks and open space of the township. We have New Garden Park, New Garden Hills, Smedley Preserve, and each page has information of that specific park or open space. You can also find our pavilion and facility rentals on here. Both applications are posted, pavilion rental form, meeting room rental form, and as well as information for each specific pavilion that we have available at the park. Next to that, we have notifications. This one is, I would say, very important if you would like to be caught up with all the news and any information that is being put out. You can subscribe to each one of these. So the Alert Center, the homepage, the calendar, the agendas and minutes, and you can subscribe through email. And then you just subscribe to whichever one you would like. I believe you do have to create an account for that, but it's just a simple with your email and just your contact information, first and last name. And then report a concern. So this one is a handy new tool. I don't believe our old website had this, but if you would like to report a concern through our website, you can go through each one of these departments depending on what the concern is. And whoever that concern belongs to, whichever department that belongs to, it'll go to them directly. Latest news. So one of the options to subscribe was for this latest news carousel type of thing. This is where most of the meeting details, events, anything like that, anything that's happening, office closures, all of that will be posted on there. And our calendar. This has, obviously it goes by months, and it has a list of everything that is going on. You can see the conditional use, the supervisors meeting, office closures, and all types of events will be posted on here. And you can also click on view all events, and it takes you to a different view of the calendar. It'll have a listing of everything. And you can also just change the view by weekly or monthly. If there's details in a single event, you can click into it and all the details will show up. You can see here, May 20th, 7 p.m. in the location. And up here as well in the top right corner, you can find our social media pages, Facebook and YouTube. This just says it's taking you to a different website, which might take a little bit. And then at the very bottom, it just has some more contact information, obviously contact us or address, office hours, phone, fax number, some more quick links and some more site links. Hopefully these links work. Yep. Also, I'm not, can you go back to the, yep, there we are. You can go back to the mega menu. If you go under community, you can find the New Garden Resident Guide. This is also new. This is just contact information for services provided by the township, put in a trifold brochure. And this was created in English and in Spanish too. So we have the English version and then there's also a Spanish version. No, it's listed, linked underneath of them. These trifolds are also printed and we have hard copies in the main lobby if anyone ever wants any of those. That's pretty much it. So those are the main features of the new website.
Great, thank you. Any board members have any questions?
Anyone has any questions?
No,
Sarah, have you gotten any feedback from the residents?
I have, yeah. They say, just Chris Robinson was in here earlier this week. He was saying that it's a lot easier to find things. And I mean, just the search bar is just right there, plain center. So you search what you're looking for and hopefully it's the first link that shows up. But yeah, we have been working since late February on organizing it and structuring it a lot better. So hopefully everything is cleaner and more organized.
Great.
yeah, thank you. I agree. My comment would be it's much more user friendly.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
So
I just
Good
wanted to
job.
set aside too, this happened because Siri was able to just kind of take this project and run with it. The guidance was do a website. I think that was pretty much it. So it was one where given a lot of levity and autonomy to kind of go out, find the right types of options, set everything up, work directly with the vendor, get everything kind of structured, the whole onboarding process, managing kind of a legacy footprint that dated back almost a decade plus of just stuff and having to kind of manage that process to move it over and have it make sense. You know, it was very helpful just to have Siri kind of take on that entire effort of itself. So, and it's still a work in progress. So if anybody has any suggestions or anything else like that, but the whole component of this was this now kind of helps consolidate communications. And that's a huge piece with just Siri kind of serving as the township's kind of central conduit for mass communication outputs, of course, in accordance with our other organizations in the region. But everything is with a very pro-digital kind of component to it, just because it's very cheap to do so and very efficient to get a most amount. But, you know, any other suggestions or inputs are always welcomed. And we're going to continue to kind of orchestrate attachments of future functionalities through the website, you know, as those recognized, identified areas of needs are seen.
Great. Any questions?
We do get everything in like receipt forms as emails. So we do have that to look back on. So we do have those emails and it shows all the communications throughout that process. So whoever submits a concern will get that in an email form. And then we can always go back into the actual website and it has buttons where you can click comment under this concern and we can comment under this concern, letting you know we have forwarded this to the correct department, or we will be giving you a call, or simply we can just email them back if they have put an email, or call them back if they left a phone number.
I know there's been a transition period, so.
Mhm. Yeah.
Click on something, you send in a piece of information, you don't really know.
Mhm.
Mr. Dungy?
I haven't spent much at all time on the Facebook part of this.
Mhm.
Is there anything there that's not in this part?
No, for the most part, everything is being shared exactly the same. If there might be some differences on Facebook where we are reposting. So if the airport posts something on their Facebook, we might be reposting that directly on our Facebook. Or the police, they have their own Facebook and we'll just repost.
The reasoning for that is originally Facebook was seen as kind of this a way to market and kind of promote and put everything on like an organizational page on Facebook. The problem is the limitations of utilizing Facebook's approach to how you have to kind of interconnect everything. And so now it's more of just a conduit of just here's an access to a list of users who are just familiar with the area and they just happen to get information from Facebook. So it's more seen as we'll get a touch point out there for engagement to pull them into these types of resources where we can kind of put more robust information here about events, meetings, so on and so forth for the township.
Mr. Gall?
I'm just curious, the township in the recreation of design, did it work with an outside firm at all? Or was it redesigned?
So the vendor that we select, so this was an ARPA funded initiative. So back in 2023, we kind of retooled our ARPA funded initiatives. And so we went with a vendor based off of just the normal procurement process for software, which case this is essentially you're procuring a piece of software. It's called Civic Plus. They're pretty prevalent in this area. So them and a couple other vendors kind of came to top of mind. So they have kind of, we'll call it like just like a template. And then with that, your design inputs and your content kind of fill in all of the gaps. But anything here was kind of essentially manicured based off of essentially a selection of a bunch of different options and a lot of back and forth, a lot of like going page by page, looking at all the aesthetics of the design of it. But we work with a vendor for that. We don't have an IT team even in the township, let alone. So we have to outsource to get anything like this done. Civic Plus, yeah, they're a very, I'll call them prevalent local government software provider.
See or look at other websites from other municipalities in the area to gain on.
Yeah, not just the local municipalities, but just nationally as well. This isn't something unique to Pennsylvania in terms of local government web pages. So like recreate the wheel, we just wanted to pick something that worked for us.
Yeah, and we had Civic Plus. We've been a customer of Civic Plus, even with our previous website. And I looked over at our local townships, different websites. So like Kennett Township, Kennett Borough, London Grove, Penn Township. I looked at all of them in Southern Chester County, and then even some in Virginia. And although they were different vendors, they were all super similar in design. And we kind of just chose which design we liked better, what layout we liked better through Civic Plus, just because they were a lot easier to work with and we've had them. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have the approval of the meeting minutes from the April 22nd meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
All, any comments, any changes, I guess? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Yep, motion passes. Okay, then we have the treasurer's report, approval of paid invoices in the amount of $7,295 and unpaid invoices in the amount of $387,452.09 for a total of $394,747.09. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the paid and unpaid invoices in the amounts that you cited.
All right, do I have a second? Okay, and Steve, do you have?
Yeah, in disclosure, there is one payment for Richard M. Crossan. That is my employer. It was for services provided. I believe it was $150. I'll have to abstain or recuse the vote on that.
Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Yep. All right, then we have, no public safety reports, that's correct?
Now we'll have the next report for the Q2 summary in the summertime frame, July, I think.
And no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business. We have the zoning hearing board applications. We have 2 of them, and it's, is Neil going to be doing both of them, or?
We don't have to have a prepared thing, so we have the summary memorandum of the actual findings there. So it's only really if you have extra questions that if you choose to have Neil come up to provide answers to, but yeah.
Okay. Right.
But in terms of the actual execution of for the 104, 106 Star Road, essentially this is seen as a request for essentially 2 modular units being built to the frontage of the property that would be seen as complementing and servicing the farm site in and of itself. So that's one where it just based off the fact that it's within the R1 and you're building 2 residential units in front of that. That's why it has to go forward into the zoning hearing process. So if you have any questions about the actual site itself, but that's the reason for the SOT for the application.
Okay. I do actually have a quick question. It's more of a request.
Should be on. It's on, the green band's on.
So in the very far back left corner of the property, 60-5-1, which is the Star Road property, there's a little bit of a kind of, looks like a little kind of scar on the land that kind of goes through. It's like a little, goes diagonally at the very triangle part.
At the back of the property?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So that is part of the Newark and Pomeroy Railroad, and that bridge abutment is the other side of it. It crosses historically across the creek right there, and so there's a trail that the township owns on the far side of the abutment, and we would like to ask if they would consider looking at putting a trail there, giving us an easement. I would only ask that since it's the far back and hopefully wouldn't interfere with their land. And that would give us the ability to get across the creek and possibly look to trail connections in Franklin Township or something like that. Obviously, you know, I understand that anything along the sides would interfere with their agriculture, but if we could just do something with them for that very back in the woods.
Let me bring it to my client. They're not here this evening, but I can bring it to them and talk to them about it.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so it'd be the very southwest corner where it meets the White Clay. Right, David?
Yes, exactly.
Is this at the bottom of the property where it kind of comes to a little point in the middle there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the little, that little thing right there. Yep, thank you.
So the issue is, Neil, we have a trail that dead ends at the White Clay. And then
Correct.
Franklin has a trail on the other side of the White Clay. And we need an easement from the Giuffretti's and then a possible easement from someone in Franklin, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think that land, that 21.2 acres on the other side, is owned by the township of Franklin.
Yeah.
Is open space. And then that 6.9 acres, not to get off on a huge tangent, but I think that might also be township land because it's in London Grove Township, because I think it's functionally floodplain, so just plans for the future.
Mm-hmm.
That was my only ask. But, yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, the other question while I have you here, Neil, this was subject to a zoning hearing application
2013.
2013.
Yeah.
And it was approved then, or it was denied? It was
Well, if I
approved,
give
but
you a little
the-
background, there was a old home that sat on the property.
correct, right on the corner.
That's right, and what the zoning hearing board ruled in short was that they could take down this, they could I'm sorry. This was, because I wasn't part of this. This was a request for a second manufactured home on the property. One manufactured home and the old home. What the zoning hearing board, I believe, said in short was, sure, you can do that as long as you take down the existing house in 6 months. And my people were financially unable to do that. So they finally were able to get it down last fall. And so we're back again now, in essence, asking if that zoning hearing board decision can be reinstated. They're going to put a manufactured home in replace of the house that was taken down, and they're looking to put now a second one there. We believe that needs a variance.
Correct. Okay. Thank you for the background.
Sure. Did that answer your
Right.
question?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. And then, yeah, we just need to make a motion to.
Oh, no, the other one
Or-
was just, that was just one of the two listings on the
Right.
actual applications. The other one was for Maple Lane. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so we can take the Star Road and we need to make take a position to the zoning hearing board.
Correct.
So I would say, since there was previous approval, if they're going to take that down, I would say we support or take no position, whatever the board's pleasure is.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion
I'll
regarding?
make a motion to support it.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I have to recuse.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Okay. And then we have,
172 Maple.
thank you.
Correct, yeah, this one was more about just the uniqueness of the lot being pretty much like a landlocked with no current on-site easement for access to the rear part of the property. So in order to have kind of a graded kind of commercial-esque structure in the back there, I mean, it was a 30 by 40 foot, so with that intent to, I guess, house equipment as the primary use in the rear part of the property. It's that landlocked aspect of the parcel and what's going to be put there that is the reason for the request to the zoning here. I mean, we can have more details if need be, but yeah.
To clarify, what we have here is we do have a property that is set back behind another property off of Maple Lane.
Yeah.
The property to the rear, the property that's the subject of the application, is owned by an LLC. That LLC is owned by a father-son. The son lives in front of the property. There's nothing on the back property at all. It's undeveloped. What they would like to do, and this is the LLC property, the property that's subject to the application, they want to put a 30 by 40 foot basically storage building. And it's going to be this for the son. It's going to be for his private use and his private stuff. We won't be using it for business uses or anything, but it will be the only use on that property. And storage buildings are not a permitted use in this zoning district, so we understand we need a variance. But this, this is something that is going to be private use for the son. And by the way, the son's in his 40s probably, but the son who lives in the front property.
Okay. All right. Any questions about that?
Yeah, want to ask Robert, you had taken a position on the 106, 104 Star Road, but I didn't see your opinion. Maybe I'm missing it on this particular one on Maple Lane.
It says, take no action.
Take no action.
It's on the second page. Yeah, for both of them was take no action, but for this one in particular, the two, the primary uses for the R1 would have to be a residence on that lot for the accessory, storage unit.
Yes.
The other part of that is the access to that parcel in the future would be another concern.
Right.
So if they did in fact sell it, how does that occur? How do you get to that property?
Right. I think the 172 is more complicated than the Star Road.
And then the other, I think there was the third component would just be making sure that it is sustained as a private, non-commercial use. And that would be another one that would be subject to, access at some point, just to make sure from a code standpoint that that is still in compliance.
That condition, we'll be telling the zoning hearing board is acceptable.
Correct.
So in that event, if they've accepted a condition, even though Robert, I mean, I guess we could take a position that we take no position, but if the
With
board should
condition.
grant the relief, that they place this condition on it. So you could do it that way or take a position, whatever. Either way, we can put the condition on it.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'll make the motion if no one else has anything. that we take no position, but we add the condition of the ownership in the future. However, Winnie wants to phrase that.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my motion.
Okay, do we have a second? Second. Okay, and then again with Christie's caveat about that you're not gonna.
Yeah.
So all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
And I apologize, I didn't catch that condition. Can you restate the condition again?
Winnie, you want to rephrase
I
for,
think that as I understand it, the lot does not have frontage. Is that right? There's no access to it.
Does not have frontage on the.
The condition would be that that it is specifically for personal use and is not a commercial building, and that no other use could be on the lot unless access to it is created. Is that what you're
So
saying?
on their plan, they have it continuing the driveway from the main parcel
Okay,
back, but it's still 100 feet from one property to the other
and no easement?
with no easement.
Right. So I think what the condition should say is that if the property is sold, that you have to convey an easement for access,
And that's
basically.
fine if it's sold. What I had heard was that there was gonna be restrictions on use, while they still owned it. That obviously would be a concern. They understand they need to go through whatever the township will need to require, whatever land development is. They have no plans for that right now. But a conditional approval is gonna run with the land. It's gonna put unnecessary restrictions on the property, other than that they'll continue to use it just for private uses, would be a problem.
Okay.
so let me understand though, you're saying that's what they're going to do,
Saying they're gonna use it for personal storage, just like.
Right.
the building.
but should somebody else buy it, you want them to be able to use it for a commercial purpose?
So that's not what I'm saying.
Okay,
I'm saying
so,
when the condition again was caveated at the beginning of, if the property's sold, that sounded a lot better than the.
Right.
Thou shalt not do this, was what I was hearing as addition. And so, yes, Mr. Allen's condition, if I hear that when it's sold, they're gonna have to address this, yeah, I think that would be something.
But I think it still should say that it's for personal use,
yes, for personal use, right?
right? If you're okay with that.
Yeah, as far as I understand, as I understood my client, that's the intent.
And if the property is sold, some access to it through, my understanding, these are not adjacent properties? But,
Yes,
They are.
so why isn't it just the 100, where does the 100 feet come in?
crossing the front property, I presume.
Yeah, so do you have,
Where's
I
the
don't think
thing?
so. I think this is,
I didn't bring it with me, I apologize.
ready.
Hang on.
Is this it?
172 Maple.
I think this is Giafretti. Yeah. This is Giafretti. So if this is the property, it's here or here? This is the road?
It's like this. Here's the road. Here's the property. And you would need to pull.
Okay. So if the property were
What's the
sold,
tax ID? Neil?
I think,
I don't know if
is it 174 Maple Lane?
so it's like 200 feet of drive to get to it.
Yeah, it's like those two little ones.
so if the property is sold, there's an easement there. It can only be sold if there is access provided
Wrong map.
to the individual, right? Because we're saying if the back one is sold separately, that's our concern.
Understand.
So that access would be provided to the
Parcel is,
back lot from the front lot. Now that's not necessary because it's the same owner. Is that right?
Different owner.
Different,
Same-
right? Same owner, same legal owner, right?
one's
Do you
owned
say
by
it's
me,
an LLC?
Some by an LLC, one's owned by me.
Oh, I get it. All right. So, all right, then that's more complicated. Who owns the front one?
One of the members of the LLC.
Okay, and the LLC owns the back one.
So there's the front, there's the back.
See how the driveway stops here?
Yeah.
Got to get to this property.
Did you request variance relief for not having any road frontage?
We did not, we only requested variance for the use. that we're
The use.
proposing for the property. This is an existing lot.
I understand that, but you're putting a building on it for the first time. So, then I think there needs to be some provision, since they're different owners, they might be in the same family, but they're different owners. There needs to be some kind of easement, driveway easement granted to the back, because they're separate owners, to the back lot. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Making that a condition right now?
Yeah, I think, well, the board would have to vote,
Yeah.
on it, but does that make sense? Okay,
We have a motion to add that condition.
I'll amend my original motion to include that as a second condition.
Okay. Do we have a second to the amendment? Okay. All in favor of the amendment? Aye.
And that was an easement to access the proposed structure.
yes. And
So is the Board of Supervisors taking no
no
position?
position, but if they grant approval, those are conditions we would request. The board would request.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Do you have a question? Yeah. Mhm. I had the same thought. I just also assumed it was a family issue, so feels like that would have been a lot easier to do. Okay, thank you for the presentation, and we're going to go on to the fiscal policy adoption.
All right, good evening, board residents. So this is essentially a continuation of the discussion that was had last month during the manager time towards the end of the board meeting about essentially pulling the ideas and concepts together from the proposed fiscal policy and putting it into an actual crafted document that we would adopt. And this isn't necessarily something that kind of pulls us into any sort of like ordinance or anything. This is just more of like a standardized best practice adopted by the township specifically to govern how we approach financial planning into the future. So that's really what this whole policy entails. And of course, you have the draft document in your agenda packets as well. So a lot of this will be kind of a retread of the brief that was provided last month, but I wanted to make sure everybody's memories were refreshed before we move forward, as well as having any conversation or discussions at the end of it. So overall, just kind of refresh everyone's memory, what is a fiscal policy? Essentially, it is holding yourself accountable to a high level of standard of financial management practices as commissioned through, I will call them, two very sound governmental-based budgeting documents and procedures through the Government Finances Office, Government Finance Officers Association, as well as the National Advisory Council on State and Local Budgeting. So these are nationally adopted standards and approaches and principles that we're considering here. So you want to institutionalize good financial management practices. At some point, everybody here in the room will be moved on, and this is kind of a legacy item that always structures how our approach as a township goes towards future financial planning. Another one too is just defining boundaries. You want to provide a framework. So every single fiscal policy is actually an attachment kind of piece of multiple different kind of areas that would be governing some aspect of financial management. So whether it be just your approach to budgeting, your contributions, your investments, your debt, your capitalization, everything is kind of contained in a summary document. Of course, it can be added to as other things come on board as well. You want to also be able to say that someone who comes in and reviews your financial, we'll call them just your organization, your financial approach, they're going to be the ones that say this is an organization that can be essentially said of under sound principles, or one that doesn't necessarily have anything, so they don't really know how to grade us or score us. So in the future, at some point, if we were to seek a bond in order to issue municipal debt, you want to be able to lower the interest scored on that debt. So you have to have some sort of scoring in the first place, which leads to a rating. like a standard, was it S&Ps or Moody's type rating? So when you go out there and you shop for rates, you're able to get a pretty competitive component to it because you have kind of an understanding of how you plan to manage your finances. Another one too is just a framework that helps when you have issues. So it's one where if you ever come up on a shortfall, economic downturn, anything happens, you're not necessarily kind of recreating the wheel in the moment. You kind of have a framework that says this is how we prioritize fixing the issue, and this is how we implement, and this is our plan to do it. So all of this kind of entails into kind of the components of it. So for this fiscal policy, I kind of chose the areas that I would consider to be of interest to the township. And these are the ones that we'll kind of go through quickly here in a piecemeal fashion, but essentially ones that have already kind of been discussed in prior iterations of other budget meetings and workshops and other just discussions in general of why we would include these in the first place. So the big part about maintaining a balanced budget, the primary purpose of this one is that right now, as it stands in Pennsylvania, you're allowed to pass structurally unbalanced budget. You're able to balance your budget with cash. And that's one where instead of potentially passing a deficit, you just say, oh, structural use of cash, everything is good, and you move forward. When that's seen as a norm, where in reality, you're using fund balance intentionally to cover your revenues required to fund operations. So that should be seen as a potential point of concern, especially if it's one that's allowed to roll over year over year over year without any sort of like, hey, is there something we should be doing to lower this structural use of cash in the first place? That was a big part of our discussions going into last year, and one of the biggest reasons we had to propose a property tax rate increase as one of our only real measures that we could do, as well as use of an interest income from our sewer investment fund, just to essentially balance the budget without using cash. So this kind of talks about how you recognize that situation, what your priorities are, as well as remedy for non-compliance. You're going to hold yourself to understanding what's causing the imbalance, how you can get back to a balanced position. In terms of fund balance policy, this is one where you're talking about maintenance of certain sustainable thresholds as a percentage of whatever fund you have in the first place. So think of this like, I have a reserve position. That's great that you have them, but how much should you have? If it's one where it's just your natural reserve position and you want to have a certain amount of operating cash on hand for your operating fund, usually the percentage is about 6 months worth of operating cash. That's one where you would put that into a structured reserve account. There's another one where you just want to have a certain unrestricted fund balance in a net position, and you want to hold yourself to what are considered to be a pretty gold standard would be like 35%. Maybe you're at 25%. Maybe you're only able to get to initially to 15. If you want to hold yourself to that 35, you kind of also want to bake in maybe a growth plan to get to that 35. How are we going to balance our budget to structure revenues to get to that 35% position? So this is all part of I'll call it a way to frame how we approach financial management in the first place, not just in terms of balancing it, but also planning for the future. And also planning for, we'll call them the worst case scenarios as well, and how much should you have in those positions. Another one about fund balance is just whether or not you have an unanticipated surplus. That might be an issue or instance where, kind of like last year, where we had a rollover and an actual reduction in capital projects from last year with a rollover of interest income that wasn't necessarily utilized. And now you have this kind of bucket of one-time cash. What do you do for that? You can actually set up a policy here that dictates we're going to make sure that we always prioritize, number one, complete replenishment of our fund balance positions. Item number two, any surplus from that goes towards one-time nominated use of cash towards, like we did this year, capital projects that were items of need that we were deferring. So deferred capital becomes your second priority, so on and so forth. Another one just in and of itself is capitalization policy. How do you understand what your assets are and how much they depreciate down to a near value of zero? And this is also not just considering the material condition that might expedite that zero valuation just through normal wear and tear. So this is one where the building we're sitting in, how long should we have this building before X, whatever that situation ends up being. Same thing for every single type of capital item that you have on your actual our entire net position. That would be kind of on our annual audit statements. And this, of course, helps build your capital plan in the first place, and then you build back on top of this. So we should be approaching either maintenance or replacement of these assets on these schedules based off of how much they're actually going down to zero, or they're well beyond that. So then you can say, hey, we've had this building, or excuse me, we've had this, we'll call it a piece of equipment for 20 years, we're at year 35. You might want to, and you haven't replaced it yet, you might want to think about starting to replace that. Another one is just in terms of, this was highlighted during our forensic audit results when we talked about just internal cash control and security of those controls and internal controls. It's what we did a lot of focus on towards last summer and all throughout the fall, was essentially structuring our cash management so everything is considered to be kind of double-checked, authenticated. It's more digital now. We're kind of moving away from that manual facilitation of cash payments, check payments, and moving everything more towards a digital footprint, which keeps us more resilient for exposure to fraud and risk from fraud as well. It's just kind of structuring how you think about how you actually move the money on a day in and day out basis. Another one is investment policy. So this was a kind of a highlight because everybody wanted to understand how we were actually investing in the first place. Of course, we had that brief the other month where we're talking about what's actually happening, so that information's already there. But this is just another one that lets people know that we have a certain process and a kind of a committable level of standards and kind of go-no-goes of how we're able to invest in the first place. So we have to understand what we can and cannot do before we decide how to do it. So this is kind of more of the what we can and cannot do. So we have to consider legality, safety, liquidity, and yield, especially if you're trying to use your investment income towards future capital items for, we'll call it, like we're doing right now with our capital replacement plan. So you have to come up with like a schedule of rolling, we'll call them dividends, or essentially interest yields that kind of produce cash, and then we use that cash to address a capital need based off of the capitalization policy that we said that this asset is going to have to be repaired by future date. So a lot of planning goes into that. So this is one where you want to make sure that you understand what your investment policy is, and then what your investment strategy is. And then if you're using that to actually structure the plan towards your capital replacement plan, you kind of marry everything up together. And now you're on a very sustainable and actually a pretty well vetted out approach towards financial management. That's a timer. They're dinging me off the stage here. One that we didn't necessarily have before, but it's one where we've actually done it in the past, which was governance towards our contributions. So as an organization, if you value contributing to local nonprofits, that's great, but how should you be doing it? How should you be recognizing viable nonprofits? What is that level of accountability that you need to hold your kind of donations, those organizations to, in terms of you want to make sure that they are providing the requisite amount of documentation, that they're coming forward and bringing reports. You're kind of defining those standards so you make sure that you're kind of using that public revenue in the best way possible. And of course, debt management. And, we don't have debt at the current moment, but it doesn't mean in the future that we will not have debt. So this one, it's pretty broad in terms of the actual amount of regulatory type of measures as a Pennsylvania entity, municipality, if you will, what we can and cannot do. But just at a high level, it's just how we actually have to seek debt and then go through the measures to actually, in this case, like absorb the amount of debt that we need to based off of all of our kind of, we'll call it holistic of parameters, how much cash we have, what is the kind of goodwill faith of the township in and of itself, our base net assessments. There's a lot of variables that go into that as well. And I think that's it. So like I said, the actual full policy is in your packets, and I'm open to any questions.
Any questions from the board?
But more of a comment. Chris, I think this, after reading it at least 4 times and hearing it at least 3 times now, I think it's great. My only question that I come up with is on the depreciation method, how often do we reassess that? Because everything's a moving target. If you'd have told me 2 years ago it would be $1 million to pave a mile of blacktop, I would
Yeah.
have said you were crazy.
Keeping track of future costs in terms of where the kind of direction that the industries that supply us with goods that we have to make that decision on, that is not necessarily involved in this, but it's absolutely involved in the process when your team is putting together the list of nominated items for capital. I mean, it's always a good standard approach that today's the cheapest it'll ever be. So it's more of like an immediacy type thing. So the other part is just more of understanding of where that item falls in terms of its own individual, I'll call it depreciation schedule. And then from that standpoint, and that's really when we provide that kind of, the 5-year capital plan, that's just a stratified out chart of recognized things that need to be replaced. But things change within that plan. So a capital plan is amendable if you need to. And then part of that is just criticality and prioritization between different projects. So normally you put together a capital plan. Number one, it's a critical item of need, but two, it might be the cost of that asset. So some things need to be deferred out while you create a strategy to slowly kind of build money towards actually being able to do that project. But it might be the worst off thing that you can do. You just can't do it because you don't have the assets on hand to do it yet. And some components, that might not be your decision. It might be about a bridge that's about to crumble, and then it crumbles 3 years before you wanted to replace it. Then you kind of tipped into it. So it's a long way of saying that there's a balance. So it's one, just make sure that you have just like a kind of a rundown of understanding of where every asset is. But then yes, some of them will be ones where you have to prioritize it because you recognize that, hey, this industry is going to be charging this much more because of X, Y, and Z. And that's where the subject matter expertise of your staff and personnel is just baked into this process in of itself. You can't have a good capital plan without good staff understanding the projects in of themselves.
Right. Because all of those things, the cost affect our budget annually.
Yes.
And that's how I arrived at that question. It's just, everything's a moving target. This is a very good, I think I would adopt it right now.
And then if it's so, to be adopted, we would put this on our actual website within our financial documents. And then of course, as we approach future budgeting cycles, this will be something that'll go into our budget book. It'll kind of basically, we'll make sure we beat everybody over the head with it, that we're kind of, this is how we're driving decision-making in the township.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Any questions from the public? Yeah. Mr. Dungy?
Question, being a scientist engineer, I'm not that familiar with finance.
Just to make sure we're getting your, I can bring it down to you. That's
That's
fine.
all right.
You good? All right.
Yes.
Mhm.
I'm not that familiar with finance. How would this affect the supervisors utilizing a significant portion of the sewer fund? In a very simple, brief answer. Could they authorize spending $5 million on something out of that sewer fund? Or would it be a very complicated
Yeah.
process?
It wouldn't encumber,
No.
none of this encumbers what our assets are. So whether or not it's tax revenue, whether or not it's fund balance revenue, just from a normal kind of, from the fund, whether it's kind of what we have with our set aside cash, all of that goes into planning. Now, in the proofing of that, the goal should be to balance the budget. So then you say, well, how are we going to do that?
I
And then
understand
you
the
look at
goal,
everything.
but
Yeah.
could they just authorize this money?
Supervisors, yes, that is their determination to do so.
That was all I needed.
Yep,
Thank you.
Mr. Furlano? Yeah, if you can come up. Thank you.
I guess to that point, and the state of Pennsylvania requires that the township has a balanced budget, right?
Yeah.
That, or they get to that point, they have a plan, right?
Balanced,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I think a lot of people see that fund and then they figure, why don't you just deplete the fund before you raise the taxes?
Correct.
But I don't know that that's what the state wants us to do, right? They want
No.
us to have a balanced budget.
Yes.
Is that correct? That's Correct. If I
Yes,
say that, it's,
they kind of do, so they only require you to have a balanced budget. That's more of like a ordinance type approach to it. Where other assets you have to make that happen, they're agnostic to that.
okay.
Now, whether or not that's a good use of, I'll call it a considerable one-time amount of funds, that is subject to the local public dialogue about that money. So right now, if this entire community wanted to do something like that, it is your own prerogative. It's just at your own detriment. So that's one
Because I
word.
saw a part where it was talking about structured
Yes,
budget, right? And the structured budget means you got enough coming in that you can pay what what you have to pay.
structurally balanced usually means that you have enough revenue to cover all
Mhm,
outputs. So it's
including
not
your-
just operating fund, it's transfers to other balances, it's transfers to your capital fund. You want to make sure that you have, because everybody just kind of thinks that operating fund is just a one-for-one expenses and revenues, but it's like you have multiple things beyond just your general fund and operations to that. So you want to have like almost 120 cents on the dollar just to be able to cover that 20%, which is other things as well.
Right.
You might have debt, you might have a lot of things.
And then just more of a tangential question is, obviously you want to grow the base, right, for
Yes.
taxation. Is there any effort to do this with with a Mr. Mulch with this? I don't know what to call it, but there's that property that sits on 41 that's been under development since I've been here for 20 years.
Yes.
But is there any action to try to get them to do something there? Or is that?
You're talking about the White Clay Point,
Yeah.
South 41.
I don't know what the plans are, but I mean, it seems advantageous if they can get that going.
Yes, it
Increase
is very advantageous for the township for them to get that going.
Is there
We can
any
say that.
activity on that, or is that?
For right now, it's still all held privately as they're trying to essentially just make the project
I
happen.
didn't know if
So,
there was
yeah.
any way to encourage them.
Yeah.
All
Unfortunately,
we
in
can
this
do is make
instance,
the
there's-
ground
yeah.
fertile.
Excuse me?
All we can do is make the ground fertile. We can't.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. That's what you can do. That's what most businesses want, right? But it just seems like a shame that it's been there 20 years.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
hasn't been developed.
but yeah, you're right. In terms of just future development from any source, not just White Clay, but all of them,
That
yes.
seems like a nice.
That solves,
Big. you know?
that solves the problem, which is grow the base, therefore you don't have to grow the rate. Like
Okay.
that's kind of the differentiation of it.
Thank you.
Last one real quick. I think it's fantastic too, so I'm completely for it. My only question is, if implemented, would it change how we handle the interest accrued from the sewer fund? Would that be still counted as income and we can just keep drawing it down? Or would it have to be reinvested into the sewer?
So every year right now, we are using every ounce of that in-year revenue created from the interest.
Exactly.
From what we have. That's not sustainable and we don't want that to happen into perpetuity. It's just what we have to do right now. Like, let's say all of a sudden the rates plummeted tomorrow, which we find some wood to knock on, we hope that doesn't happen. It's one where we would be left with a significant budget shortfall because our revenue strategy for FY '24 is built on about $1 million worth of interest revenue from that sewer sale fund. That was in lieu of a higher level tax increase for property taxes because we had such a big deficit to make up for from years prior. So yes, yeah, the goal would be as soon as we get out of that moment where we have to create it and use it simultaneously, it would be to create a, we'll call it like a funding policy for interest income and how we're going to do that. Because it's essentially just building a cash reserve position for what, but that's the subject to the public input during the budget process. Where do you want to see the money go?
Exactly.
Staff will put it there. I'm just letting you know that it's still public's complete decision to understand what you think should happen.
Just cognizant of, we're tapping the interest income off of it, but we're not adding to the principal, so it is net a reduction every year just. from
It is, yeah.
inflation.
We're essentially not, we're
Right.
kind of like this right now. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Well, thank you, Chris.
So I don't know.
All right. Then we have the America 250.
Did they
Oh.
make a motion?
Oh, sorry. Did we need to? Sorry. You're right. My bad. Yep. Do we have a motion to adopt the proposed fiscal policy as written? Okay. Any other comments, anything? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nope. Great. Thank you, Chris. Okay, now we go on to the America 250th PA Resolution 24-008. And this is just a motion to adopt the resolution supporting the upcoming 250th semi-sesquicentennial.
Yeah.
It's sent out to all the townships. They're just asking everyone to
And we
support
also,
that.
yeah, the 250 Commission in Chester County asks that you send it to them too, so that all the townships in the county have adopted the resolution. And then Pennsylvania and the United States, so there are multiple places.
Yeah, and so the Historic Commission, just so you all are aware, the Historic Commission's already started to work on this at the local township level, looking to do events. Because we played, as you may or may not know, a role in the Battle of the Brandywine 2 years after the revolution, well, 1 year after the revolution started. So we'll be looking to doing that in the next year or two. So do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, second. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, all right, passes. Thank you. All right, we have the East Parallel Taxiway Reconstruction Project. You have a-
So the East Parallel Reconstruction Project, we maintain a 12-year plan with the Bureau of Aviation utilizing FAA, federal and local, as well as state dollars on grant funding. Our East Parallel Taxiway is denoted in the red area here. This parallel taxiway was developed and reconstructed in 2009. The connection to what was new in 2009 to our approach end of 24 is in very poor condition pavement-wise. So working with the state and the FAA, we listed a reconstruction project within our 12-year plan with a 4-year focus. They did last week notify us that the FAA will be funding this project. Federal and state funds will be used, as well as local airport dollars. The first phase of this project is the design of the parallel taxiway. And tonight's motion that I'm asking the board is to approve the engineering agreement, which allows for the design of the project, which would go to bid. We're planning on July. So the first phase of the project, again, is for the design, and the amount for the engineering for Trans Systems, $78,718. The local cost out of the airport fund, which is budgeted for in the 2024 capital, local shares, $3,935.90. So the motion tonight is to approve the engineering contract for Trans Systems in the amount not to exceed $78,718 for the East Parallel Taxiway Reconstruction Project.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Yep. Thank you. And again, I really just want to emphasize the fact that John's efforts have resulted in us only having to pay 5% of a project. So that's really spectacular. So appreciate your hard work.
So it's part of the taxiway project. One thing with the engineering is what we're classified as for airport, what type of aircraft is it. Except right now, we're what's called B1 small, which allows for more of the, it allows we can land larger aircraft, but the fleet is created aircraft with 49 footprint. The taxiway width is based on that. So right now, 25 feet is width for a taxiway, so we wanted to justify it larger than reconstructed as
just out of curiosity, is this going to increase traffic into the airport? Or do you have a plan to understand if it will?
This is not necessarily going to increase, this is part of the infrastructure of the airport. It's a grant obligation. It's priority for the airport to maintain the fee without a runway.
Okay.
Taxiways. Those are major.
I understood it like it wasn't operating and you were going to get it operating. I must have misunderstood what you were
No,
talking.
it's a major entry.
Oh, okay.
To approach that runway 24. We have a single sheet of pavement out there, but we have effectively, you know, an east-west runway. So if you're taking off and landing runway 24 into the plaza, if you're taking off runway 6, you're taking
Okay.
off to the east. To get to 24, you have to taxi on the taxiway, which is designated in that way. So, very bad poor condition. It's marked in red on the signal. So,
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? No? Okay, then we're going to go on to the fiscal year 2024 paving program.
Yeah.
The John Martin's thing. Yeah, we just did it. Yeah. Yeah, right.
No.
We just want to hear.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry, I don't have any cool slides with airplanes with lightning bolts and lasers and stuff like that. Mine's just filling in potholes, unfortunately. Through the co-op this year, we bid our road paving program, which was more or less budgeted for. The numbers came in and we are looking at like 1.4 million total. That is doing Star Road and Pemberton Road with base repair, widening, level, wearing course, the whole 9 yards. And then covering up, well, repaving Bevan, Ronway, Delaware, and Kelleher from the base repair that we did last year. And that also includes Yetman Station and McHugh Road for doing tar and chip, because last year for Yetman Station and then 3 or 4 years ago, I think for McHugh, we only did some base repair and leveling just because of the amount of traffic the roads got. It really didn't justify putting a wearing course down. So now we're just going back with the tar and chip in the fall to seal that up to help protect that blacktop and give it another couple years of life, hopefully.
And just to clarify for everybody, this was the amended plan from the original 24 capital plan, which was based off of how we achieved some surplus balance in last year's interest income, and then balancing that out towards the kind of the renewed version of the roof project they were going to do. And that remaining balance was enabling us to actually bolster back up our 24 paving program that we had to intentionally reduce during the planning process for FY24 because of the shifting of interest income dollars into the operating fund. So this was kind of a way to replenish that ability to address, we'll call them the big three, if you will, right now, but the finishing of Star Road, the completion in its entirety of Pemberton Road, and of course, one that we get a lot of feedback on, none of it very positive, which is Hillendale Road. And the goal is now that we can pull Pemberton in a year early, we could actually then choose to do Hillendale Road instead of 3 years from 25 to 27. We can focus on that road from 25 to 26. So it's one that's a big, that we'll call it, that's a huge hurdle to get over with because it's so long of a segment and it's in such disrepair that it sponges up a lot of the capital funding capacity. This allows us to do that a little bit better. So that was why we nominated this approach with that surplus balance. So the good news is the way that it was bid out, it came in lower as part of that kind of wholesale cooperative bid component to it, and not to rush in a potential use of that other remaining dividend of surplus here because other capital items are still shifting around at this point. So this is just saying that we're able to do the roof and Pemberton with the normal paving program, and that we still have some nominal surplus left over in our interest income from 23. So we're stretching that pot of money pretty well right now. So any questions about that?
Do you have any questions?
Kenny, do we know if the state is going to be doing any paving in New Garden Township?
I have not heard any for this year, no. Yeah, I have not heard any, not within the township anyway.
Chris and Kenny, thank you. I think, Chris, you both worked very hard on trying to get this thing, and you know, if we get through to 26 and complete Hillendale Road, that will be very, very welcome improvement to everyone who travels Hillendale. Star Road is a very heavily traveled road.
They're
I know-
all heavily traveled
Yeah,
anymore.
But I mean, Star Road is like a cut through
Yeah.
to avoid 41, and Hillendale is now used to go all the way to Chad's Ford instead of Route 1. So these are very important roads that are 30 years in the makings behind.
Any question from the public? Mr. Dungy?
Traveled Hillendale lately.
Yep.
Yes, every day.
Past 26.
No, it's going to need some patching and base repair, but
Is that scheduled for this year?
it is not. Well, as needed.
Yeah, it's gonna be as needed for this year. We have a
Yeah.
ton of we have way more pipes to replace this year than we ever have. Luckily, we have some people to do it, actually. So that's gonna help. It's gonna be, but we have to get 9 pipes in before the paving starts in the next month or two.
Yeah.
And then we have to wait for school to let out, because with Pemberton, with the school being right there, we can't close the road and having the elementary school there. So we have to wait for that to get out. And then everybody's obviously got summer vacations and stuff like that. So we're gonna be right up against the wall, getting everything done.
Still 1.5.
So a road like Hillendale deteriorates so much on the outer 2 feet as opposed to the center.
Basically, the roads weren't that wide to begin with, and over the years, they've gradually gotten wider and wider as vehicles have gotten bigger and bigger, and just the base isn't there, which is why these numbers are so high, because we're having to mill down the normal road surface and then go even deeper and put stone back in it, then asphalt back in it, then more asphalt on top of that to build up the edge of the road. Because back in the day, they were 15-foot wide cart paths for horses to pass, and that was about it.
Well, I've lived here since 2006, and that road hasn't been widened, and I seriously doubt it ever was.
Oh, it definitely was,
Any idea when?
long before my time.
And is there any way to, when you redo it, to eliminate the future deterioration on the sides?
If I could figure out how to do that, I wouldn't be working here. I mean, everything has a lifespan. We build it as best we can to get as much life out of it as possible. I don't want to say I don't like paving roads. I do like paving roads because they do make it better, but then that just adds new complaints. Now people are speeding, now they're using that road more often and stuff like that. So it's a double-edged sword. If we could build a road to last 50 years, that would be fantastic, because that would make that money last longer and we'd be able to get more roads done. But roads that used to last 20 years are only lasting 10 because of the materials now. There's roads that we've paved since I started working here, which was 08, that we've already repaved. But then there's roads that they did 20 years ago that still look brand new, just because of the way the materials changed over the years.
Do you think the 3-foot trucks on Hillendale is causing any of this?
Oh, it absolutely is, yeah. The truck traffic around here is one of the biggest issues we have with the roads holding together. Cutting corners and stuff like that, and then all that weight on the edge where there's not any stone to begin with and not any base, that's what's pushing them down.
Why I ask is, you guys reconsider 26 for Hillendale? Even patch.
Just to clarify, it would start in FY '25. So, and then again, just to reframe this, you're talking about a road that in and of itself cost about the same as all of these roads combined. So you're talking about a massive whale of a project that needs to be fit at some moment in time. And that's one where we even would have to add more revenue towards this project this year just to do Hillendale Road, which is why it doesn't make sense for FY '20. Think of it like a payment program towards something, we're trying to basically get rid of all the little pieces, then focus on the big piece. So we're power paying our debt right now with small roads and some of the other stuff, and then we're gonna power pay the big project when we get to it. So yes, it's kind of a stacking of priorities, but it's also capital capacity to do it. So,
understand, but like Mr.
no.
Alvin mentioned a minute ago, there's a ton of people use that to go all the way to Chad's Ford.
Yep,
Very heavily traveled.
correct.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and Mr. Dungy, I think some of the things Kenny's doing, improving the drainage, replacing the pipes. I mean, the infrastructure under the roads contributes to it. And when you put an 80,000-pound truck on it, it just deteriorates that much faster. So
Can we prohibit those trucks?
what's that?
Can we prohibit the 53-foot trailers?
They already are on Hillendale.
They already are, yeah.
Drive by my house. I call the police and do something about it.
And he's gonna say as a local delivery.
Yeah,
Yep.
if,
Well, I'm sure it is a local delivery or they wouldn't be there.
Well, then they're allowed.
Yeah.
So
For-
it's
for-
not prohibited then.
no,
For through traffic, they are prohibited, but if there's anything on that immediate stretch that we can't stop them from going there. Yeah,
They're doing local deliveries, I don't doubt.
right.
No. All right, we have a motion then to authorize the township manager to approve the paving contract.
so moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nope. All right.
Thank
Kenny.
you.
Okay, then we have the fiscal year 2024 departmental performance update.
And good evening once again. This was just, following up with, last month's, last month's quarterly police and fire report. Also wanted to make sure that we're doing kind of a year-to-date performance report for the actual township services themselves, just to kind of show, number one, how we're able to start, now that we have some additional capacity, start collecting better metrics, but then also get feedback of, what other things people would want to see, and also understanding kind of like how we're performing and tracking ourselves now, and as an initial kind of benchmark and where we plan to go from here. So this will kind of make itself a little bit more explanatory here. So this is just where we're tracking for road repairs and stormwater repairs for our Public Works Department. So for those, just kind of making sure they understand road repairs is kind of more of a encompassing term for roads, signs, curbs, sidewalks, you name it. So anything within kind of the right of way in of itself. So the only thing really noticeable here that I took from this data was essentially just the jump. So we're still seeing the same kind of seasonal trend there. But the biggest one was just we added 3 FTE, so therefore we're just getting more work done. So therefore we're just up at a higher level. So we're being more productive, but still in line with the, we'll call it the January reaction to all the bad weather and filling potholes and a lot of that type of activity. And then the other part is just for stormwater. It's kind of like a lag component to it. So it's one where we kind of slowly grew into it a little bit, but it's also one where we would probably expect to see some kind of similar seasonal trends with this as well. And this was just a summary component of the spring cleanup. So it's our annual event that we have at Public Works. That's a 4-day event, I think it is, from Thursday all the way through Sunday. And just kind of showing 3-year totals here of just people's interest in attending the event, dropping off whatever they have in terms of large bulk waste items to bring to the Public Works Department. And you can see kind of the more heavily trafficked days, of course, always Saturday is the most prevalent one. It's also one where we noticed this year a bit of a drop off from last year. No real reason, rhyme or reason why, but just one where we'd like to track these trends so we understand how to order and prepare all the dumpsters and disposal items and stuff like that for service. For community development, at this point last year, we had no community development department, so anything to report would be an uptick from where we were at almost 12 months ago. So this is actually something that we're starting to really start understanding information to collect, how we're going to collect it, the kind of, we'll call it the technology that we're going to try to leverage to improve the reporting on those collections, you name it. But this is one where we have the most amount of touch points out within the township because we have a lot of program areas that we had to cover, which is why our biggest ramp up effort for operations was investment of staff capacity for community development type services. And so for those that don't understand what that is, it's of course always our zoning reviews, our property maintenance code enforcement program, our rental inspection program, our fire marshal commercial building code inspection, as well as just our building code function in and of itself in terms of residential and commercial permitting and inspections associated with that. So if you kind of just take every single aspect of that service and you stretch it out on a line, there's a lot of like befores, durings, and afters that go with every single touch point along the way. So prior to this, we had less than one personnel doing all of this stuff on a string of a 365-day year, and it's just untenable. Nobody could manage that workload. So of course, looking backwards, we didn't have a lot of collective data because they didn't have any time to really put things into a report because they didn't have a system or an understanding to actually put the data in the system. So we're actually taking a lot of time not only putting the current data in, but we're actually taking a lot of time going backwards to find old data to also put in the system so we can measure against what we're doing today. So it's a lot of like before and after as well. But you can see there's kind of like a spring kind of, I'll call it increase usually associated with building permits for in and of itself. A lot of it based off of seasonality. I can't wait for that summer, get that new deck out there in the backyard, whatever it might be. But it's just one where you kind of see some ramp up. Same thing with other kind of seasons and activities as well. Things kind of ramp up in the spring, kind of, reach a roller coaster apex sometimes towards the early summer, and then it kind of drops back down a little bit. There's also one where we like to kind of start looking at this, which I like to think of it as a clearance rate. So it's one where you're thinking about taking permits is one thing, but processing and getting them out the door is another. We were probably more of this bar was kind of like over here to the left in prior instances. We had a big backlog we had to deal with. Now it's good because we're getting everything in and out of town hall within the requisite municipal planning code standard, which is I think 30 days or less than that. And then in of itself, we like to see if we can move that continuously towards the fastest turnaround we possibly can, of course, while keeping everything in compliance standards. Another one too is you'll see kind of the numbers here, a lot of them, so we don't have true comparables to this time last year, but you'll see in some of the heightened numbers as well. A lot is due because we just processed a lot of permits for the New Garden Elementary School. So that's kind of, while it's not a significant amount of number of permits, the number value of those permits is actually kind of pushing the pot to a higher level than it normally would be. So that's why we kind of broke it out. So really a significant part of our permitting revenue comes from one project this year. But also let you know that those big projects are actually really good for the township when it comes to other revenues. So when we talk about non-tax kind of based revenues coming from fines, permits, and fees, building activity is actually something that actually works for the township. So it's not just base assessments, but of course, you need to have building activity in order for that to happen in the first place. That's my other plug for economic development, being a sustainable other source of revenues for the township, so we don't have to rely solely upon our property tax base. Another one too is as you create that product, then you can have services going out to continually inspect those sites as well, which is part of our compliance standards. Another one we had this year in terms of an effective enforcement date of January 1st was our initial foray into having a true fire marshal building inspection, commercial building inspection program. So Charlie Owens, our appointed fire marshal, has been very active as a now true township staff member out there in the field in terms of just initial adoption, a lot of just cold knocking on doors, getting into facilities, meet and greets, getting his face out there that, oh, by the way, the township's doing this now. And then another one too is just making sure that everybody understands the process as well. So it's a lot of education, a lot of outreach. And then of course, with that, we start getting the actual registrations and then scheduled inspections. And then of course, the completion of them as well as any feedback of any infractions and follow-ups too. So he's a very, very busy person. Another one too is we're tracking numbers on our code enforcement program now. So we're still kind of trying to clean up some data as well, just because we're starting to leverage our financial system, which is kind of a more holistic kind of local government system, which includes community development program kind of functionalities that we never really tapped into as much. So we're now finally stress testing that system. And of course, there's some kind of kinks that we're working through. But for the most part, you can see a pretty consistent, in fact, we had kind of a mirror of itself in January and February in terms of just complaints and intake. But the biggest one here is just understanding that not every complaint is necessarily a violation. So we just get a lot of public, we'll call them just, hey, is this something? And of course, the big part is just education, both to the person submitting the complaint. And then in this instance, when you actually go out there, you engage on site, because of course, this is a triggering point for our staff to, go out to that residence or building, whatever it might be, engage them on what was issued as a complaint. And then for the most part, compliance is usually just people's lack of awareness that the code existed in the first place. And then the real mitigation effort after the fact is usually a clearance rate. It's pretty successful, roughly 9 out of 10 instances where the property owner is pretty compliant and they fix the issue. And of course, we set out again and re-inspect. Another one is the rental inspection program. I actually changed the deck a little bit. I got some numbers that were new as of late on Friday afternoon. So these are much higher than what was because we hadn't gotten the full end of April and month of May in there yet. But you can see we've been pretty successful in getting new rental inspection registrations onboarded for our township. So this is one where it's not only township staff that supports the program, but also our third-party building code official, which is building inspection underwriters. It's a part of our township ordinances that we shall appoint a third party to do our building code function. They also provide rental inspection services, and they've been doing it in this area for a pretty good amount of time, so they have a lot of expertise in it. And so relying on them to kind of get out there and start adjudicating a lot of these inspections is a big help to kind of not have to crawl, walk, run to this. We can kind of sprint right into it because they already know exactly where to go, who to knock on doors with, and get those registrations complete, which is great. They were asking for it as much as we were asking them to see if they could do it in the first place. But holistically, it's just been a lot more involvement of the township getting out and making sure that everybody understands our kind of local rules and regulations when it comes to, we'll call them property-related issues in the township. So it's been a net positive for us overall. For parks and open space, this upcoming season, we're mostly focused on projects and programs. So for the most part, the park ordinance was inset last month in terms of the carry and carry out. So you now see the absence of trash cans, and the net feedback from staff going out there is that they don't have to worry about the bulk. Like that essentially got rid of the key issue, which was bulk item dumping in New Garden Park specifically. They've noticed a considerable reduction, in which case almost like a net 100% reduction in that issue in of itself. So that was kind of the big win there, and they're continuing to monitoring and just making sure that it's continued to maintain compliance with that. So right now the effort is really kind of twofold. It's that kind of long-term planning for our two parks. We just got done completing the adoption of the Smedley Preserve, the Lochnaron Golf Course Master Plan. And right now we're mostly working on orchestrating a grant strategy to facilitate funding to execute those projects. So our park staff, as well as our finance staff with our grant writer, are very busy right now working on getting all those materials put together to seek for submission for those grants whenever they do come time to submit. And of course, that effort is duplicated for New Garden Hills. And then in this instance, we're kind of doing two things at once with each site tentatively, which is the actual implementation of our MS4 program. So those projects are still ongoing as well. And of course, those are ones that are pre-commissioned from a prior agreement with PennDOT to have a shared revenue source towards funding them. And the township is a party to it. And of course, they're using the primary execution of that strategy at Smedley Preserve. Of course, I feel like I'm still the only person that calls it that, the golf course, to actually execute that stream restoration project to meet our sediment reduction compliance measures. So not a lot of fun to talk about, but it's a huge commitment and compliance issue completion for the township that was recognized actually as a thing in 2019, 2020. So we're like 4 years late to the stage. So this is very much an urgent project for us to get done. And then, of course, the actual township event programming coming up. It's already been posted for advertisement, so everybody should know. And of course, if you pay attention to our website and our communications, you'll get information about those events as they come through. As far as the airport, you just got some information from John about the flying field airport, the air show on June. So this is just kind of understanding kind of how they get the money to support themselves in the first place. And so you think about general aviation, you mostly think about your maintenance shop, your fuel sales, and of course your hangar rentals, which are more consistent and kind of, that's kind of like an understanding that we have locked in leases, that money is coming in the door. So this is one is more of variables that we track, and for the most part, it depends upon seasonality. You'll see a net green increase up here for 2024. That also coincides with when you're installing higher level equipment, you're going to have more higher level maintenance revenues from that installing of the equipment because it's just a higher cost of maintenance and labor to do kind of more technical detailed work. If you could think about that, you're not just turning a wrench, you're installing an actual digital flat screen into someone's actual thing. So it's a kind of a premium installation service, if you will. For fuel sales revenue, we actually had a pretty low month in January. If everybody remembers, it was like one of the wettest months that I can think of, I can remember. But it was one where, of course, people don't fly when there's clouds and rain falling out of them. So, of course, we got right back into it. So most part, you would expect maybe a slight jump, but we had a huge jump because for the most part, people that have airplanes like to fly them. So when they're grounded for a whole month, they're gonna immediately hop back into it when they can. So we actually right-sized for the month, or excuse me, for the spring quarter there. So we're actually pretty much exactly where we need to be right now. And of course, same thing, seasonality, weather's good and hot, people like to fly. Weather's cold and damp, people don't like to fly. And that's just one where we track those against each other. So we're pretty much on track there. Another one too, we started in July because that's actually when we procured the flight school as well, but you'll see kind of same thing in seasonality. So this would start right here and kind of the descent as well. So we're tracking kind of flight hours of our actual flight school program as kind of another measure to say that, you know, our net kind of operation is kind of all in alignment. So if like one was way out of whack with another, we would kind of have an understanding that something's not right here. For those unfamiliar, because the project was approved last year and it's been ongoing, the kind of the annex of the terminal extension project is almost near completion. I think at this point it probably is. I think John left. He probably would have liked to talk about this a little bit more, but essentially this was a project approved kind of with a similar, very 90-10, I think was the split for this project in terms of use of federal funding to expand our terminal. And of course, these are the actual live pictures within the actual structure of itself. And I think the actual final kind of just completion of the project was tracked for the end of this month as a no later than, but I think they might be on track to finish early, but I don't want to speak out of turn. But this was the distribution of funding for that project. It was approved last year. Actually, it was approved before that. It just got into motion last year. And it's been a very successful project thus far. So the primary component for this one was providing better accessibility for public restrooms at a terminal, which of course then increases terminal capacity, which then increases usage of the actual terminal in of itself. People like to go to a nice facility with easy accessible facilities as well within the facility. And then of course, in this instance, it was just much needed room for growth because of those who haven't been in our terminal, it was very tight in there as well. So this allows for kind of flight planning, a lot of kind of all the flight instructors to do more kind of, they're not on top of each other, kind of with students kind of operating at the same time. So just think of it like operational capacity.
Yeah, and the ADA compliant. So there's
ADA
no more
compliant restrooms as well. And that was part of it about getting a public restroom built for the most part. That's kind of the standard too. So that actually makes you more competitive for that grant funding in and of itself. John didn't touch on this one, but I will. So the actual Future Aviators Camp, I can't remember if July is now closed or not, but we have full registration complete for the later part of the summer. And I think they were nearing completion of registration as of about a week ago as well, Sue. So both successful programs in terms of just summer programming to get people to the airport, especially our youth, get them interested in the viability of aviation. It's just like an interest and just see where it goes from there, which is the whole point of the programs in of themselves is exposure. And then finally, administration, we talked about website kind of related metrics. So this is just kind of tracking our engagement. So we'd like to understand who's going to our website and maybe reasons for why they're going to it when they are. So you can see from Facebook, I believe this was about the posting of our tax rate increase. So of course, there was a lot of immediacy of people engaging with it. Just to make sure people understand the differences between reach, engagement, and likes. So reach is just like it came up on your feed and you're engaging. When you're engaging it, you're actually clicking on the actual thing. You're expanding the post. You might kind of just some elaborative type of stuff. In terms of converting people into likes, that's tougher just because there's apparently like a firewall between people's ability to like something in terms of Facebook. I think we've just gotten way too desensitized to really engaging with Facebook at this point. It just crosses our radar and then we move on to the next thing. But we actually saw a lot of engagement when it came to post reach in the spring timeframe, because this was for our air quality meeting engagement that we had in that same timeframe. So there is a little bit of overlap and bleed from month to month in these in terms of the metrics that we get back from Facebook, but it kind of makes sense on a timeline of things happening in the township. But the good part is we can actually see Facebook engagement, which gets to a larger audience that's just kind of out there in the ether that might have New Garden kind of somewhat on their feed, and then people actually going to our township-specific materials. I think of this like channeling management for marketing kind of stuff. You get them here and you drive them here. So this is one where you'll see a lot lower in scale and numbers for the most part for some of like the more kind of, we'll call them, actually from here, I'll go to the YouTube component of just getting them to actually like, I'll call it, engage in the details, if you will. So all of our content, even tonight, everything is recorded and put to our YouTube feed so you can get a live kind of feel for everything that was discussed during the meeting. You can see the biggest one was during the air quality one. There we had actually, I think at some point during the height of that meeting, like almost 250 to 300 viewers during that, just on YouTube alone. And then for the website engagement, this is just one where you can see traffic. We do get a lot of traffic too as well. So the good news is people are constantly kind of monitoring and coming in and out of the township website for materials. So this is what tells me is, okay, cool, we should continue to leverage our website because obviously there's an adoption rate here. People are aware that it exists and they are engaging with it. And so we would want to structure our communication strategy off of digital intake because these numbers somewhat correspond to our local footprint here. If we were in this New York City and there's, 10 million people and you're getting 6,000, it's like, well, then we have to think about something different here, but that kind of makes sense to me. And then of course, for people obviously who didn't have a remembrance of the old website, this is kind of what it previously looked like. Actually, it was on a pretty poorly coded backend environment as well. So it was very difficult to just manage content because it was always like replacing itself, but building on top of it. So for every page, we created like 5 additional pages of it. So just that process of like cleaning everything up and moving it from one to the other was just a huge mess clean up there. Another one too is just structuring and cleaning up our actual communications releases, which from, I got a lot of kind of like prior engagement with how we getting community news out there. And so the previous strategy was kind of mixed. There was a lot of like, we'll do the more in-depth stuff on a quarterly or biannual kind of seasonal basis as in this newsletter. And then we would do these like kind of infrequent, kind of ad hoc, kind of like, off the cuff kind of updates. And there was kind of like, I don't know, like a huge disparity between the execution of that on a consistent basis. And so it made more sense to just say, standardize everything, make it very clean. So you have a more habitual amount of consistent information about the township at all times. And then of course, the big items are to have these types of presentations and stuff to kind of codify a lot of the information at once. And so we're doing more kind of bi-weekly releases of information, kind of a township specific on the organization, and then township specific on just kind of the area in of itself, local businesses, local highlights, other organizations, things like that. So that's kind of where we're going to be structuring the change to for our communications as well. But the whole point is to have more content, singularly based, more frequent, more detail, and of course more digital friendly as well, because everything that we're seeing kind of shows that there is already a committed amount of engagement there. Just in terms of some other fun updates, at least from our finance department, so our FY23 annual audit process in terms of the preliminary kind of component to it's already started. They'll come back out there and do the larger site work, but our auditor has a very broad portfolio, so they kind of structure it in chunks. So it actually takes a little bit longer of a process. So it's more of like a post fiscal year close, 6-month kind of back end cleanup process to get the audit complete, more so than what I'm usually used to, which is like year-end close within 3 months and then you're done. As far as initiatives, we approved the budget software, so that's something that we're implementing this year in order to get it up and running for year-end budgeting purposes. We actually never really had an HR-specific function in the township, so we're actually having some of our staff seek SHRM certification to be a more professional HR professional, to instill HR professionalism into this organization, of which some of those things are like wellness days, making sure that people understand their benefits, making sure that we're kind of compliant from all aspects from HR. So like I said, when we're talking about a lot of professionalism implementations across the board for all departments, this is inclusive of the fact that we actually never really had a true HR program in and of itself as a township. Another one, just in terms of grants, I already alluded to the fact that we had the ones for the strategy for Smedley Preserve, but we actually did win a recent award through Chester County for their Vision Partnership Program. This is the 50% funding split for the zoning ordinance project. So we were one of 4 awards in the county. We had a very strong project, and that's one where the process is actually already started with our vendor, who is Michael Baker International. We awarded that contract out at a previous meeting. But it's one where we're going to be engaging with the county to kind of understand that kind of grant compliance, check and balance with them as well. But that process has also started. And I believe that's it. Any questions about the township organizational performance?
Questions? Yeah. Question from the public? No, you did a really great job. Thank you, Chris.
No, this is all staff, so.
Okay, then last we have the Historic Commission appointment of Regina Fees to the Historical Commission. We have a motion to appoint her.
I'll make the motion to appoint.
Okay, do we have a second?
I will second.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. All right, and then we have strategic priorities.
Right, just flowing into the next one here. So this was another continuation of last month's just item of interest when it comes to having the board provide your own ranked priorities when it comes to those items that aren't necessarily like the 10-year comprehensive plan kind of approach, but like these are the highlighted issues of focus that we need to kind of tailor towards future budget planning. When I say future, like FY25 budget planning processes, and just kind of where the board sits when it comes to telling the public. And obviously that's a huge kind of like transparency measure of this is what we're hyper focused on in terms of criticality. It's not saying that one is insanely more important than the other or vice versa. It's just in orders of items of need, we're going to address these first. And then as that kind of list dwindles down, do we have enough remaining to address everything? So this was, I wanted to kind of zoom out just a little bit. So for everyone who hasn't been into our 2018 comp plan, these are all kind of the categorical areas of the township that were highlighted as items of priority within the township from a long-term planning standpoint. And of course, these kind of translate themselves into offshoots for capital projects, for programs, for policies, ordinances, everything. So everything we do as a township for work in terms of a day in and day out effort is kind of materialized from some aspect of our comp plan saying, this is probably what you should be working on. And then some of these are more of just pretty, maybe like low hanging fruit type endeavors, or some of these might be for like for transportation, it's like enhance Route 41. It's like, okay, well, that's going to take 50 years. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So there's a lot of disparity between that as well. So that's why I'm saying you need to take this and craft it into a more organized document that you can say, for the year 25, these are important principles that are derived from this, but also take into context the execution component of that, which is a different matter because you don't necessarily have all the resources, and not even don't necessarily, we do not have all the resources to attack all these initiatives at once. So the FY25 priorities that were highlighted in the spreadsheet that I provided last month in terms of when we went over them and some of the reasons why. So not necessarily a financial kind of, we'll call it like a cost perspective, but the management one, tonight's meeting was a critical first step towards that, was just creating some sort of framework to it, adoption of a policy, making sure that we are approaching everything from a mindset that this has to be structurally sound in terms of our approach to it. Because with that, then we can actually get stuff done. We just have to plan for it appropriately. But if you just have this ad hoc financial approach, you're never really going to consistently meet all of your objectives because you might not have money to do that. And that's very important to have. And so the other ones were just kind of highlights of other discussions had throughout the course of the last, 12 plus months. So organizational excellence, kind of the offshoot of the prior briefing that we just did, kind of performance and metrics and reporting, kind of showing you what's going on out in the township. That's a component of it, but you can't have that unless you have a competent and well-funded staff kind of out there doing the job on a day in and day out basis. Same thing with infrastructure investment. That's one where you can highlight issues, but you have to have a sound capital plan put into motion to be able to identify a funding mechanism for those projects. And it's kind of so on and so forth towards all these different ones in terms of the item of interest and of course some of the issues that need to be sorted out with it. Like right now for economic development, that's a big kind of bite at the apple when you talk about wanting to get a lot of growth of your tax base, but how do you do that? Well, it's an execution of like 5 different initiatives within that area of need as well. So all of these are kind of all bits and pieces of the current, I'll call it somewhat of a percentage of significance in the current operating and capital budget. So they're already kind of in front of us as how do we approach all these things and what should that prioritization look like based off of everything. So that's what I wanted to kind of highlight here. So this is based off of everybody's aggregate inputs here. So I'll just kind of show the scoring here. And it kind of came out to the way I thought it was going to be honest. We had like 1,000 different discussions about actual financial management. So that's why I kind of rose to the top. We need to be able to understand how we're going to be solving moving forward as a township. And then of course, based off of all of our tax-based issues that we've talked about, the board pretty much said that economic development is kind of that tier 1 of investment that we need to do because, investing in your financial management approach is more of a policy change and just kind of dictating practices, but it doesn't cost a whole lot to do that. But economic development requires other initiatives to kind of how you're going to invest into creating the conditions that are ripe to be able to have a robust environment for growth of your tax base. And that's a lot of different things that need to be done. So this lets me know that this is something that needs to be a heightened state of priority as we go forward with, it might be future market studies, it might be branding, it might be other things that we can do. It might be investment into a future FTE who's a certified economic. You never know what that's going to look like, but at least understanding of what those initiatives look like and then approaching the board and saying, this is where I think you should invest your money to complete this initiative. Infrastructure investments, I think tonight's also meeting alone kind of hit the priority on that one. We chose to use surplus to paving a big key road. We're using other remaining surplus of that to replace big key critical stormwater culverts. We're doing the most that we can to replace our already aged and thus continuing to age even worse, capital infrastructure as well. One that I think this is one where most people don't necessarily wholly understand because these are organizations that aren't necessarily township departments, but it's always out there, it's omnipresent, if you will, that at some point there will always be an ever sliding scale upward for funding public safety services. It's one where from a policing standpoint, when you have a large body that is supported by a collective bargaining entity behind it, and you have a market around here where it's viable for future increases in that regard, you can have a regional approach like we do today, but how effectual is that regional approach based off of who's the current members are versus maybe some support from other entities to support that regional relationship. And it's not even necessarily to lower the cost. It's basically just to thwart the rate of future increases. What you want. You want to maintain some semblance of like a, like more of a low linear glide slope rather than like an exponential J curve up. Same thing for fire. We just haven't had that discussion really yet. But you can see over the course of the last few years of public safety funding increases towards fire, it's now on the radar. It's right up there in terms of significant investment. We're near $1 million all in for all fire services at this point. What does that look like in 2026, 27, 28? Who are our support areas around us, and how do we even influence the situation considering it's not quote unquote our fire department? We don't have a seat at the table. How do we affect that situation? So there's a lot of things that go into that. Some of it is policy and planning and organizational kind of approaches to it. The part is actually funding the department in and of itself, whatever version you might have. But at least this lets me know that the board wants to address this manner, not necessarily we're going to go out tomorrow night and go figure this out, but it's one where these things need to start happening. And it's better to start now than to wait and then react to the situation when it gets much, much worse. And that's kind of the other part of it as well. So this would mean to me, if I was sitting in the crowd and anything hearing this, that, these are things that are on the radar, and maybe I should start understanding what this means in our area as well. I think this kind of fell back maybe towards the last year. This might have been up more towards the top part because it was so dire in certain situations. But since we addressed a lot of it, now we're more of like making sure that we're keeping up with the cost of inflation and coal and living expenses, kind of just, I'll call them more normal, if you will, but more normal personnel matters when it comes to organizational excellence and maintenance. You want to maintain that retention rate. So focusing your inward look of how we're making sure that our staff is, well, essentially, compensated and well-equipped, so just making sure that you're looking at that, as well as making sure that you're also looking for, future changes in benefits and those types of policy things and how that impacts your overall organization as well. Enhancement of community services, if you remember going back to this one, this is like just programs that we provide. The airport's a big one. It's like one where we invest a little bit, but it's actually able to kind of compound into this larger level events that we hold on an annual basis. So looking at those types of things, but across our park services as well, because right now we kind of do kind of small tactical type events and then maybe a few kind of larger ones, but it's one where, if we have that moment where we can kind of tip it into a larger event, what does that even mean to support it as a township? And what do those opportunities entail given our current assets? And then as you can see, I believe this one was more of the fact that it's been so near the top and such a priority for so many years that it probably fell down just because it feels like, hey, we've committed a lot of funding in this area. We do have a big carved out. We were recognized by the county by how strong our program was. So it's like, maybe that's one where we kind of focus on it less, or just not as the heightened state as the end all be and all, because we need to create this kind of balance in between two, in this case, almost combative entities here. But it's still a priority because it's on the list in and of itself, and it's in our comprehensive plan to look at that. And then the other two are more self-explanatory. These are just ones coming from the comp plan as well, but just, growing, expanding New Garden Flying Field, I think as long as it's done in a sustainable manner, where those future onboarding of services and capacity fund the operation in of itself and kind of maintain that self-sufficiency, like any governmental entity, that should be the focus. But then also looking at kind of how number 8 can kind of feed into number 2, and that might be one where you kind of have a duplicative effort there. So that kind of would raise that up. And then of course, with energy efficiency right now, there's a lot of kind of just potential maybe shifting in the market in of itself, and just also just, what does it mean for the township with its facilities look like? We talked about solar, we're talking about the roof, and it's like maybe for the roof it doesn't make sense, but maybe for a larger array somewhere on site it might make sense. But then what does that mean in of itself, like getting something like that funded and put into motion? So it's good to know that, we're not just going to try to go out and get like $1 million solar array built at all costs here. We're going to make sure that we can understand what it means, but it's not the highest priority. So that's really it. I wanted to understand if you have any questions about anything regarding this, but this at least lets me know that I will likely highlight these in kind of an updated state of the township as we move into the summer and prepare for the FY25 budget planning cycle. And then also, as we see potential areas of conflict, they were highlighting those in those budget workshop sessions. So everybody kind of understands, okay, this is where we need to make an actual like decision that maybe impacts another program area and what that means. So any questions?
Any questions? Any questions from the public? No, really great job. Thank you.
All right.
And then last, we have a zoning project update.
The zoning task force update and just in general. So this was one where our, I think we had all but one, you're good? Okay. All but one of the seats potentially filled, but we're pretty much there. So the goal is to start those meetings in June, I believe. If not, we're going to defer them to July, but essentially the zoning task force will start meeting pretty much on plan here with the tentative 4-member planning commission membership, as well as like a business industry type footprint, We got a confirmed commitment from the Kennett Consolidated School District, which was very important. And then, of course, we actually had, they are in the land development business and they do land development projects. They have a tacit understanding of zoning, and they also happen to live within the township and do a lot of projects throughout the township. So it was seen as a pretty significant kind of SME person to involve in the project. So you raise that kind of, what you always want to understand is kind of stress testing of your proposed ordinances by having somebody who has to deal with it on a day in and day out basis. So overall, a good composition. I think we're going to actually have a pretty strong approach to not only the process, but who's involved in the process as well. So, and of course, we had the site tour on Friday with the actual consultants. They came in from their regional headquarters, and we drove all around the township and showed them everything. And they took a lot of photos, and we're looking forward to the work effort required to fix this thing.
Great. All right, any other questions? Yeah. Just as a reminder, we have the kickoff of Rhythm and Brews next week on the 28th at 6 o'clock. Then family fun night and a whole bunch of fun stuff going on. So just check the list of things at the end of the agenda. And other than that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. All right, tripled. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.